My family told me not to bring a gift until my husband handed them the golden envelope. I never thought I would be betrayed by someone I loved, especially not in front of so many people. The golden envelope in my husband's hand seemed to glow under the dining room chandelier, and I watched as every face around the table transformed from polite indifference to something I'd never seen before: genuine shock, then hunger, then shame. It wasn't just the humiliation of being told not to bring anything to my own sister's birthday celebration. It was the way she laughed when I showed up empty-handed, the way my mother's eyes avoided mine, the way they all seemed to share some secret joke at my expense. I never thought they could hurt me like that, but what I didn't realize was how much deeper their betrayal went, how long they'd been planning this moment, and how wrong they were about who I really was. As I stood there in that suffocating room, feeling invisible among my own family, I realized I had a choice. I could continue to let their perception of me define my worth, or I could choose to change everything, not just their opinion, but the entire dynamic that had kept me small for so long. I didn't know how it would unfold, but one thing was clear: my life would never be the same again. My name is Isabella, and for 32 years, I thought I understood my place in this world. I was the reliable one, the one who bent over backwards to keep everyone happy, the one who always said yes even when every fiber of my being screamed no. I thought that's what love looked like: endless accommodation, silent sacrifice, and swallowing your pride until it became a permanent knot in your throat. The evening that changed everything started like so many others. My sister Rachel had called 3 days before, her voice bright with fake enthusiasm. "Isabella, don't worry about bringing anything to my birthday dinner. We've got everything covered. Just bring yourself." The relief in her voice was unmistakable, as if my contribution would somehow diminish her special day. I should have known something was wrong. Rachel had never been the type to plan ahead or coordinate anything. She was chaos wrapped in designer clothes, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes despite being perpetually broke and chronically irresponsible. But I believed her. I trusted her. Walking into that dining room empty-handed felt like walking naked into a boardroom. The table was set for 12, adorned with elaborate centerpieces I could never afford, laden with catered food that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. My mother's friends were there, the ones who always spoke about their children's accomplishments in voices loud enough for everyone to hear. My father sat at the head of the table, already 3 drinks in, his disappointment radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "Isabella." Rachel's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "You actually listened. I can't believe you didn't bring anything." The laughter that followed wasn't warm or inclusive. It was the kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl, the kind that tells you the joke is on you. That's when I saw it: the pile of gifts in the corner, elegantly wrapped packages from every single person at that table. Everyone except me. They had all brought something beautiful, expensive, thoughtful. I was the only one who had followed Rachel's instructions, the only one gullible enough to believe that my presence alone would be enough. My husband David squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt something crinkle against my palm. A golden envelope, thick and substantial, had appeared as if from nowhere. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw something I'd never seen before: a quiet fire, a protective fury that made my heart race. The room continued its cruel symphony around us, but all I could focus on was that envelope and the question burning in my chest: will I choose to stay silent, or will I take control of my own story? Sitting there with that golden envelope burning against my palm, I realized this wasn't the first time they had orchestrated my humiliation. It was just the first time I was paying attention. The memories came flooding back like water through a broken dam, all those seemingly small moments that I had dismissed, rationalized, or simply buried deep enough to forget. There was my high school graduation, when my parents threw Rachel a pre-celebration party the night before because she had gotten into college. My achievement was mentioned in passing, a footnote to her potential. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching my mother fuss over Rachel's dress for the party I wasn't invited to, and feeling like I was disappearing right there in my own home. Then there was my wedding day. Rachel had shown up in white, not exactly white, she'd argued when I confronted her, but cream, which was totally different. She'd spent the entire reception telling anyone who would listen about her new boyfriend, the one who was probably going to propose soon. Even my wedding photographer had ended up taking more pictures of her than of me. I'd convinced myself it didn't matter, that I was being petty, that her happiness should make me happy too. The pattern was everywhere once I started looking. Every job promotion I'd earned was met with comments about how lucky I was, as if hard work and competence were just cosmic accidents. Every relationship milestone was overshadowed by whatever crisis Rachel was navigating. When David and I bought our first house, my parents spent dinner discussing Rachel's credit problems and how they might be able to help her secure a loan. I had become invisible in my own life, a supporting character in everyone else's story. But what haunted me most wasn't the big moments. It was the 1,000 tiny cuts that had slowly bled me dry. The way conversations would shift when I entered a room. The way my opinions were overlooked or dismissed with a patronizing smile. The way my successes were minimized and my struggles were ignored. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them. That's just how Rachel is. They don't mean it that way. Family is complicated. I'd been so busy protecting their comfort that I'd forgotten to protect my own heart. I'd been so afraid of being seen as difficult or dramatic that I'd made myself convenient instead. The worst part was realizing how long I'd been complicit in my own erasure. I'd trained them to treat me this way by accepting it, by smiling through it, by pretending it didn't hurt. I'd been the architect of my own invisibility, laying each brick with careful precision until I'd built a prison around myself. Now, holding David's hand and feeling the weight of that mysterious envelope, I wondered, can I confront the hidden wounds, or will they remain buried forever? Something fundamental shifted inside me as I sat there listening to Rachel hold court about her latest drama, something about a coworker who didn't appreciate her creative input. The golden envelope felt warm against my fingers, and suddenly I understood what David had been trying to tell me for years. I had choices. I had always had choices. For the first time in my adult life, I stopped asking myself what everyone else needed from me and started asking what I needed from myself. The answer came with startling clarity. I needed to stop being a passenger in my own life. I needed to stop waiting for permission to exist fully, to speak up, to take up space in rooms that I had every right to occupy. I thought about the business I'd been building quietly for the past 2 years. The consulting firm that had grown from a side hustle into something substantial, something profitable, something mine. I'd been downplaying it, calling it just a little project when anyone asked, because I'd learned that my successes made other people uncomfortable. But the truth was, I was good at what I did. Really good. Good enough that I'd been featured in industry publications, good enough that clients recommended me to their networks, good enough that I'd recently been approached by a major corporation about a partnership that could change everything. David knew. He'd been the one pushing me to own my success, to stop hiding my light under the bushel of their expectations. He'd seen the contracts, watched me work late into the night, celebrated every milestone with the enthusiasm my family had never shown. He'd also seen what this constant diminishment was doing to me, how I was shrinking myself smaller and smaller to fit into their narrow definition of who I was supposed to be. The envelope in my hand wasn't random. David had planned this. He'd been waiting for the right moment, the moment when I would finally be ready to see what he'd been seeing all along, that I deserved better, that I was worth more, that I had the power to rewrite the narrative they'd written for me. Rachel's voice cut through my thoughts. Of course, Isabella wouldn't understand. She's not really the business type. The casual dismissal was delivered with a smile, as if her ignorance about my life was somehow charming. I felt David's thumb trace across my knuckles, and I knew he was giving me permission to do what I'd never done before, defend myself. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but firmly and truthfully. The question was whether I was ready to use that permission. Around the table, the conversation continued, but I was no longer part of their play. I was writing my own script now, and for the first time in years, I was the protagonist. The only question remaining was, can I find the courage to change my life, or will I hesitate when it matters most? I opened the golden envelope under the table, my fingers moving with deliberate calm while Rachel continued her monologue about office politics. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick, expensive stationery with an embossed letterhead I recognized immediately. It was from Harrison and Associates, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the country. The same firm that had been courting me for months. The letter was brief but powerful, a formal offer for a senior partnership position, complete with a salary figure that made my breath catch. But more than that, it was validation. Written proof that while my family saw me as small and unremarkable, the business world saw me as valuable enough to pursue aggressively. David had been collecting these. I realized that now. Every article that mentioned my work, every client testimonial, every professional achievement that I'd mentioned in passing, he'd been documenting it all. This envelope wasn't just about one job offer. It was about creating an undeniable record of who I actually was versus who they thought I was. I studied the faces around the table, cataloging their assumptions, their casual dismissals, their comfortable certainty about my limitations. Rachel was describing her innovative marketing ideas to our mother's friend who owned a boutique. My father was nodding along, that proud smile reserved exclusively for his golden daughter. They had no idea what was coming. The beautiful thing about truth is that it doesn't require drama or raised voices. It just requires the right moment and the courage to speak it. I wouldn't need to attack them or defend myself. I would simply need to reveal what already existed. The success they'd been too busy to notice, the respect I'd earned in rooms they'd never entered, the life I'd built while they weren't paying attention. I planned it with the same methodical precision I used in my consulting work. First, I would let Rachel finish her current story. Then, when the conversation naturally shifted, I would mention the partnership offer casually, the way she mentioned her various schemes and dreams. I wouldn't make a big announcement. I would simply let the information settle into the room like sunlight gradually filling a dark space. The genius was in the timing. David had chosen tonight because it was Rachel's birthday celebration, the night when all attention was supposed to flow toward her, when I was expected to fade into the background. By revealing my news now, I wouldn't be stealing her spotlight. I would be proving that I had my own. I could already picture their faces changing, see the moment when their carefully constructed narrative about me would crack and crumble. The surprise, then the disbelief, then the scrambling to recalibrate their understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. But as I sat there, mapping out each word, each pause, each strategic revelation, a whisper of doubt crept in. Will I feel victorious when it's over, or will the consequences leave me feeling empty? The moment came exactly as I had envisioned it. Rachel had finished her story about revolutionizing the boutique's social media strategy, and the conversation had shifted to career talk. My mother's friend Margaret was discussing her daughter's promotion at a law firm, and the familiar symphony of achievements and comparisons had begun. Speaking of career news, I said, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the chatter with surgical precision. I actually have some news to share. The table quieted, faces turning toward me with the polite but slightly surprised attention usually reserved for unexpected interruptions. I could feel David's energy beside me, supportive but not interfering. This was my moment, my choice, my voice. I've been offered a senior partnership at Harrison and Associates. I let the words hang in the air for a beat before continuing. It's quite an honor, actually. They've been courting me for months. The silence was immediate and profound. Margaret's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My mother's eyebrows rose in a way that suggested she was recalculating something fundamental. Rachel's smile froze, becoming something brittle and uncertain. Harrison and Associates? My father's voice carried a note I'd never heard before, respect tinged with confusion. He knew that name. Everyone in business knew that name. Yes, I replied, maintaining my calm tone while reaching for my water glass with steady hands. They specialize in corporate restructuring. My firm has been consulting with them on several high-profile cases over the past 2 years. Your firm? Rachel's voice cracked slightly on the words. Meridian Strategic Solutions. I founded it 3 years ago. I watched as the information settled over them like fog, obscuring their familiar landscape. We've grown quite substantially. Last month, we were featured in Forbes for our innovative approach to organizational psychology. The transformation was remarkable to witness. My mother's face cycled through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been pride, or possibly embarrassment at her ignorance. My father had gone very still, the way he did when processing complex business information. Margaret looked fascinated, leaning forward with genuine interest. But it was Rachel's reaction that captured my attention. The golden child was struggling, her usual confidence wavering as the room's dynamic shifted beneath her feet. For perhaps the first time in her life, she was not the most successful person at the table, and she didn't know how to navigate that reality. I had no idea. My mother finally managed, her voice small. I know, I replied simply. No accusation, no bitterness. Just acknowledgement of a fact that had defined our relationship for years. David placed the envelope on the table, and I carefully removed the official letter, allowing them to see the Harrison and Associates letterhead, the formal language, the impressive salary figure that I didn't bother to hide. The room had become a different place entirely. Where moments before I had been the invisible sister, the unremarkable daughter, I was now the center of a recalibrating universe. They were seeing me, really seeing me for the first time in years. But as I watched their faces change, watched them struggle to reconcile this new information with their long-held assumptions, I felt something unexpected. Will I feel relieved after this? Or will it leave me questioning everything? The drive home was silent, but not the comfortable kind of silence that David and I usually shared. It was the heavy quiet that follows a thunderstorm, charged with aftermath, thick with the weight of what had just transpired. I stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets blur past, and tried to understand why victory felt so much like vertigo. The rest of the evening had unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. My parents had peppered me with questions, their voices carrying a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Margaret had asked for my business card, mentioning a friend who might need consulting services. Rachel had retreated into a sullen quiet, her birthday celebration effectively hijacked by my revelation. But it was the smaller moments that haunted me as we drove through the night. The way my mother had kept glancing at me with confusion, as if seeing a stranger wearing her daughter's face. The way my father had suddenly straightened in his chair when he realized the magnitude of what I'd built. The way Rachel's friends had turned to her with questions about her successful sister, and how she'd had no answers to give. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, as if I'd won a game I'd never really wanted to play. Are you okay? David's voice was gentle, carefully neutral. I think so. I lied, then immediately corrected myself. Actually, no. I'm not sure what I'm feeling. He reached over and took my hand, the same hand that had held that golden envelope just hours before. What you did took courage. Did it? Or was it just cruelty dressed up as courage? The question surprised me even as I spoke it. I spent weeks planning that moment, David. I calculated their shock like a chess move. What does that make me? The silence stretched between us as I grappled with the uncomfortable truth. In my quest to stop being a victim, had I become something worse? The look on Rachel's face when the room's attention shifted away from her, was that justice, or was that me perpetuating the same cycle of diminishment that had wounded me? The weight of that possibility sat heavily in my chest. I remembered being 12 years old, watching Rachel win another academic award while I sat in the audience, invisible. I remembered the sting of being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. Tonight, I had deliberately inflicted that same feeling on her. The irony was devastating. When we got home, I found myself standing in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my success. Awards on the walls, client testimonials, press clippings, all the achievements I'd kept private to protect other people's comfort. The partnership offer from Harrison and Associates lay on my desk where David had placed it, but instead of feeling proud, I felt confused. I thought about the years I'd spent making myself small, accepting scraps of attention and approval. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue, swallowed my pride, chosen peace over truth. But I also thought about the woman I'd become in that dining room tonight, strategic, calculating, armed with information designed to wound. Neither version felt entirely like me. The hardest part was realizing that my family's dismissal of me, while painful, hadn't been malicious. They genuinely hadn't known about my success, because I'd actively hidden it from them. I'd been so afraid of their potential jealousy or competition that I'd created the very invisibility I resented. I had trained them to overlook me by making myself overlookable. In the bathroom mirror that night, I saw a woman caught between two identities. The old Isabella, who had swallowed every slight and smiled through every dismissal. And this new version, who had wielded truth like a sword, cutting through years of misconception with surgical precision. Both felt foreign to me now, costume versions of a person I was still learning to become. David found me there an hour later, still standing among my achievements, still processing the complexity of what had happened. I wanted them to see me, I told him. But now I'm wondering if I was using my success as a weapon instead of just sharing who I've become. He was quiet for a long moment before responding. Maybe both can be true. Maybe you needed to be seen, and maybe the way you did it tonight was the only way they would have listened. His words offered comfort, but they didn't resolve the fundamental question that had settled in my chest like a stone. Has revenge really brought me peace, or is there more healing to be done? 3 weeks passed before I understood what had really happened that night at Rachel's birthday dinner. The revelation came not in a moment of dramatic clarity, but gradually, like dawn breaking over a landscape I'd been navigating in darkness. The first sign was the phone call from my mother. Not the apologetic, guilt-laden conversation I'd expected, but something different. Genuine curiosity about my work, real questions about my business, actual interest in my life. She'd done research, she told me. She'd looked at my company online, read the Forbes article, even called Margaret's friend about consulting services. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. I should have been paying better attention. The acknowledgement was everything I'd wanted, and somehow less than I'd expected. It felt good, but it didn't fill the hollow space inside me the way I'd imagined it would. That's when I began to understand that the real problem hadn't been their perception of me. It had been my dependence on their perception of me. I spent those weeks taking long walks through the neighborhood where David and I had built our life together. The trees were changing colors, and I found myself noticing details I'd missed before, the way morning light filtered through autumn leaves. The sound of children playing in distant yards, the simple rhythm of my own footsteps on familiar pavement. For the first time in years, I felt present in my own life instead of constantly performing or hiding. The journaling came naturally. Page after page of honest reflection about who I wanted to become, what success really meant to me, what kind of relationships I wanted to cultivate. I wrote about the difference between earning respect and demanding it, between sharing joy and wielding achievement. I wrote until my hand cramped and my thoughts became clear. David and I had countless conversations during those weeks, long talks over morning coffee, quiet discussions while we cooked dinner together, late-night whispers in the darkness of our bedroom. He helped me see that the woman who had spoken up at that dinner wasn't a stranger or an imposter. She was me, finally allowing myself to exist fully in the world. Rachel called on a Tuesday evening, her voice small and uncertain. "I've been thinking about what happened at dinner," she began. "I realize I never really asked about your life. I was always so focused on my own drama that I didn't notice you were building something amazing." The conversation lasted 2 hours, but it felt like we were making up for decades of missed connections. For the first time in our adult lives, we talked as equals. Two women trying to figure out their places in the world, both carrying wounds and dreams in equal measure. I learned that her constant need for attention came from the same place as my need to hide, a fundamental uncertainty about her own worth. "I was jealous," she admitted. "You always seemed so put together, so sure of yourself. I thought if I could just be loud enough, dramatic enough, I might feel as confident as you looked." The irony was almost funny. There we were, two sisters who had spent decades misreading each other, both feeling inadequate, both performing different versions of themselves to earn love they'd already had. Rachel told me about the anxiety that drove her constant storytelling, the fear that if she wasn't the center of attention, she might disappear entirely. I told her about the years I'd spent making myself smaller, convinced that taking up space would somehow diminish everyone around me. "We wasted so much time," she said, and I heard genuine regret in her voice. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe we needed to go through all of this to get here." That conversation changed something fundamental in me. I realized that my success, the business, the recognition, the financial independence, had never been about proving anything to them. It had been about proving something to myself. And somewhere along the way, I had proven it. The golden envelope had been David's way of showing me what I'd forgotten, that I was already enough, already worthy, already successful. The revelation wasn't for my family's benefit, it was for mine. I needed to see their surprise to understand my own transformation. But true empowerment, I discovered, wasn't about their recognition or their shock or their sudden respect. It was about the quiet confidence that had been growing inside me for years, the certainty that I could trust my own judgment, make my own choices, and build a life that reflected my values rather than their expectations. Standing in my office that evening, looking at the partnership offer one more time, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete freedom to choose. Not to prove a point, not to meet anyone else's definition of success, but simply to follow my own path wherever it might lead. The question that remained was gentle but important. Am I ready to move forward, or is there still something I need to let go of? 6 months later, I found myself in a place I'd never imagined possible, completely at peace with who I was and who I was becoming. I had accepted the partnership at Harrison and Associates, but not for the reasons I might have 6 months earlier. The decision came from a place of genuine excitement about the work, about the chance to mentor other consultants, about the opportunity to build something meaningful on a larger scale. The prestige was nice, but it was no longer the point. My first day at the new office felt like stepping into a life that finally fit. My colleagues treated me as an equal from the moment I walked through the doors, their respect earned through years of excellent work rather than dramatic revelations at family dinners. I found myself laughing more, speaking up in meetings without second-guessing myself, taking on challenging projects because they excited me rather than because I needed to prove anything. The mentoring aspect of my new role brought unexpected joy. I worked with younger consultants who reminded me of my earlier self, talented but uncertain, brilliant but hiding their light. I found myself sharing not just professional guidance but life lessons about the difference between confidence and arrogance, between being seen and being heard. My relationship with my family had transformed in ways I hadn't expected. We saw each other regularly now, but the dynamic was entirely different. I no longer showed up to family gatherings carrying the weight of their approval or disapproval. I came as myself, successful, confident, but also vulnerable and real. The change was most evident during our monthly family dinners, which had become genuinely enjoyable occasions. My parents asked thoughtful questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. They shared their own struggles and triumphs without the performative edge that had colored our interactions for so long. We had become a family of adults rather than a collection of roles and expectations. Rachel and I had become actual friends, not just sisters performing familial obligations. We supported each other's ambitions instead of competing for attention. She had started her own marketing consultancy, inspired partly by watching me build my business. We often called each other for advice, celebrating wins, and processing setbacks together. The sister who had once felt like a rival had become one of my closest confidants. "Remember when we used to compete for everything?" she had said during our last conversation. "Now I can't imagine succeeding without you cheering me on." The most surprising change was in my parents. When they stopped seeing me as the easy child who required no attention, they began to see me as the complex, accomplished woman I'd become. My father now called for business advice, treating my opinions with the respect he'd always shown my male colleagues. My mother bragged about my achievements to her friends with genuine pride, not the performative kind, and had even started referring clients to my firm. But the deepest transformation was internal. I had learned to trust myself, my instincts, my worth, my judgment. I no longer needed external validation to know I was on the right path. The golden envelope had been a catalyst, but the real gold had been inside me all along. The courage to claim my own life, to speak my own truth, to take up the space I deserved. The confidence showed up in unexpected ways. I negotiated better contracts for my firm without anxiety. I spoke at industry conferences without the imposter syndrome that had once plagued me. I set boundaries with difficult clients and maintained them without guilt. I had finally learned the difference between being accommodating and being a doormat. David and I had started talking about expanding our family, buying a bigger house in the suburbs with room for children and gardens, and planning adventures we'd only dreamed about before. These conversations felt different now because they came from abundance rather than proving anything. We were building a life that reflected our values, our dreams, our vision of happiness. "You're different now," he told me one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "More yourself, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing or hiding or calculating. I was simply being. Sometimes I thought about that night at Rachel's birthday dinner, about the woman who had sat at that table feeling invisible and small. I felt deep compassion for her, understanding now that she had been doing her best with the tools she had. But I also felt profound gratitude for her courage in that moment, the decision to stop hiding, to speak up, to claim her place in the world. The golden envelope still sat in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that transformation is always possible, that we have more power than we think, and that sometimes the most radical act is simply telling the truth about who we really are. Sometimes I would touch it and remember the woman I used to be, not with regret, but with appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. I was Isabella, not the invisible sister, not the reliable daughter, not anyone's supporting character. I was the author of my own story, and for the first time in my life, I was excited to see what I would write next.